how's it going?
Hey, not bad yourself.
Pretty good. We're here to talk about your real estate business. I don't know
Awesome.
about you, but I'm having a cider. I can't think of a better way to talk about real estate than to have a drink.
All right, cheers. Um, and thank you for doing this, Henry. I really appreciate your time and to come out and do this interview. So really appreciate that.
Okay, if I'm correct, you got into this, I want to say 15 years ago, something like that. Like
Yeah,
you got your first place
in 2008. So
2008, yeah. So
14,
that's
yeah, 14 years
14
ago.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell
Um,
like okay, what was it again? It was like a house, semi-detached, a house, or
it was a semi-detached house at Woodbine and O'Connor.
tell us about the some of the challenges in terms of like jumping into the market. You mentioned the exponential increase in value, so that means making that down payment must be a lot harder nowadays, right?
It is, yeah. Because in the city, it's probably pretty much $1 million for property, if not higher. It's probably quite tough to find $1 million now, and 20% of that is 200,000. But if you can get it for 5% down, it's 50,000. So that's still quite a bit to save if you're starting from nowhere. I recommend trying to partner up with someone. That way, maybe you guys can do 50-50 each, so 25,000 each. And then, I mean, it's going to be tough. I would try to cut the expenses down, and I would possibly try to find if you're renting like a house, for example, you might want to try to find roommates if possible. But it's going to be a very tough uphill climb. I would I mean, if your parents are, if people's parents are able to help, that's obviously a bonus. I didn't get that. My parents didn't like what I do, but I don't know if they'll see it, but I
So yeah,
saved
it's
it, right?
interesting. It's interesting you say that. So like right now, I guess your main strategy is you've been acquiring a network of business partners to go along with you to invest rather than I guess doing it all yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I guess like I mean the reward is that with multiple parties involved, you can kind of pool together your assets to meet those like major marks. So like I guess yeah, talk about like some of because you mentioned you had some commercial properties. So talk about the process and I'm sure with the way things are like with the major market increases and then as well as like the the physical amount of the down payment being a smaller percentage now because if you're kind of like hovering around similar income streams, even bringing together different people, um, there's it probably won't catch up to like that major increase of what like 20% will look like. So if you're going less than that, traditional lenders like banks probably won't want to talk to you. So you probably have to rely on like private lenders. Talk about some of your process. Like I know you bring in people, you have alternative lending
yeah.
ways to tap into finances.
I can talk about that Kirkland Lake one. We bought a sort of like a hotel format property. This was in 2019. What I did was I use I use a mixture of private money and line of credits, and I asked the seller to take back a mortgage as well. So this one, I saw it on the MLS. I went there to take a look at it, and I noticed that the sellers, they're quite, they're not young anymore, so they want to sort of get out of the property because they had some issues with their health, and so I asked them. They didn't have a mortgage on it. I asked them that, and so I asked them if they were interested in in any sort of creative financing. So so they were. So the sellers will be the bank, and then I would give them a down payment, and then I would borrow from the sellers, and we work out a structure for that. So I borrowed the down payment from another property. So the first one is always the hardest to get, I think, the first property, because after that you can use the equity from the other ones to help uh, um, pay for that down payment. So I I borrowed money from another property to give as a down payment to these sellers. They gave me a loan, and each month I gave them a certain amount for 2 years was the term. And then during this time, I use my line of credit to renovate as many units as I can. And the objective is to complete 15 units. So 15 units in that property. And I quickly ran out of cash, so I needed to ask other investors to lend money. So for each investor I asked, there was two others that I asked. The rents, once that unit was completed, the rents were able to cover the debt service for that particular loan. So if I rented it out, so let's say I pay $50,000 to renovate it, that unit, and it generates, let's say, $15,000 in rent. Sorry, not 15,000, $1,500 in rent, and the loan on that was let's say $800. Then I can still survive for that month. So it's just a matter of math. So that's how I can. Uh, so that's how I structured the loans with the other two investors to pay them back. Once this 2 year term is up with those sellers, I'm going to ask the bank to borrow a traditional mortgage. At this time, the bank uh, hopefully would consider lending, because now the property is all rented out instead of 25% rented out. And then now there's leases in place. The unit looks really nice. The repairs are all completed. On bank's perspective, this isn't as risky as before. So hopefully they'll lend us the funds. I'm going to borrow enough so that I can pay back all of the people that was involved in lending the money, and then I'll pay the bank the monthly debt service, and then I'll still collect uh, the income from that property. So that's sort of that 15 unit apartment, sorry, the 15 unit motel that I worked on since 2019. So we're coming to a close this year. This would be the second year.
And you mentioned with I'm sure the interest rates from private lending compared to traditional lenders like a bank would differ wildly too.
Mhm.
Are you able to sort of give a, a guesstimate, I guess, in terms of like what a traditional mortgage rate might look like versus a private lender rate?
Yeah, right now the interest rates are going up slowly. For commercial, they're going from, this is what my mortgage broker says, but you might want to check your broker. So it's 5% to 6% for traditional institutional commercial loan, and then for private loans, they normally start at 8 to 10% for first position. So so you want me to describe first position? It's essentially the first loan that you have on that property, because you can have a second loan on it too. So for second loans, they're normally 10 to 12%, and they're more risky because the people that gets paid is the people in first position first, and whatever's left, if there is any, then the second position people will get paid. But normally lenders will not lend for more than what the property value is worth. So the maximum I've seen is normally 85% is sort of the top in terms of how much someone will have a private lender, and then mainly a private lender will lend. The banks would normally lend 75%. They're called loan to values, 75% loan to value to 80% loan to value. And then,
Okay, so
yeah.
so like with that in mind, I mean like huge discrepancies. So you're looking at almost double the interest rate between a traditional versus private lender. Yet, from what I understand, your network of partners that contribute investments into this project, like whether it be Kirkland Lake or whether it be in Sudbury, they're all getting a return on a regular basis. You're able to basically give them. It sounds like it's a monthly dividend, or
So so each one would be different. The Kirkland Lake one, I only had lenders. So So they have a interest that they have a payment that I have to fulfill every month. So that's like a loan structure deal that I have with them. But for Sudbury, it would be kind of like it would be an equity position that that the partners would take on. So they won't, for the Sudbury one, we're still drafting up the details, but the right now we're thinking to pay quarterly of whatever is left behind after all the expenses. So it's not necessarily going to be the 12% or the 10%. It's just whatever's left behind. Um, and then upon sale, that's when the investors would cash out once the property has appreciate after we're going to hold for 5 years. That's when we will sell. So that's when we're going to have a split. So normally a very typical a very typical structure would be the GPs, general partners, would hold, for example, 30%, would get the profits of 30%. Sorry, the GPs would get 30% of the profits, and the LPs, the limited partners, would get 70% of the profits upon sale, for example. And it doesn't have to be every month. It depends on how you want to structure this. So it could be every quarter. And after the rents come in, minus all the expenses and debt service, whatever's left behind, they can also have a split there. So it could be 30% for the GPs and then 70% for the LPs. So if that property nets $10,000 at the end of the month, 3,000 would go toward the GPs, and then they can split accordingly. Normally it's an even split depending on what it is, and then the LPs would get their share, and it's split in proportion to their investment. So if they contribute 50,000 out of the $200,000, you would get the percentage from that. It's a quarter, so 7,000 of net profit times a quarter of that. So that's the amount that they're getting.
So Caine, I know you've been doing this for like 14 years. You come from humble means. You're by no means. I don't think you would consider yourself the 1% in the city. You know what I mean? So like, I mean, how can someone like an average person jump into what you do? Like, I mean, someone maybe like with a young family who is using their income to pay for expenses to raise that family. That includes things like rent, food, childcare, and so forth. How can they jump into this?
Yeah. I think I would start from education. So I would read as much as you can about this business, real estate, or whatever investing vehicle you're interested in. So if it's real estate, so I would watch and listen to videos, read books about this topic. And the second thing I'd probably do once you have an understanding of how to get into the industry is to start networking. So find a partner that is interested in doing something similar, and you're kind of on the same level in which you can help each other out. Perhaps they have a little bit of savings and you have a little bit of savings. You guys team up together to purchase maybe something in a secondary market. I think it's the easiest way to start, because hopefully you guys can qualify for 5% down. And that's what you really want to do is try to get that 5% down. And then at the same time you're doing all of this in the background, you're also trying to cut your expenses. It's probably going to be difficult if you have a family, but I mean it's gonna be tough. But you try to cut Netflix, try to drop the cell phone bill, try to not buy too much coffee, and just buy meat, vegetables, and fruit at the supermarket. Like it's sort of like living at a temporary level in which it's a bit uncomfortable, but it's only temporary. And once you get the foot in the door, I think that's when things would start to become a lot easier, because then you can use the leverage from that property to buy the next one and then the next one, and then start to network with people more, and people would have more interest in what you're doing, and then you can start to pool funds together and then purchase larger projects. But I think education is the part in which one should start. Um, and so um, and so that's what I would recommend.
But at what point do you, I mean, obviously living frugally and trying to cut back on expenses is great, but at what point, especially with the rate the market has been increasing exponentially, at what point do you just say, screw that, man, and just like take whatever you can and jump in? Because I'm sure like if someone just goes on like the rice and beans diet, they could probably save whatever, but like after a year, what if the prices jump even further than like what they were able to accumulate? Like how do you respond to those who feel like, oh man, I don't think I could ever catch up?
It's possible to do it. I wouldn't look at that, growth. It's going to rise, but there are also going to be opportunity at the same time. So the books and the education that you'd be indulging yourself in, they'll show you how to look for that opportunity. So a couple examples is the Sudbury one. I was the only offer in this hot market because I looked at the days on market for that property. It's over 150 days. And I asked the agent, and it was actually foreclosed. The lenders took it back, so I knew that was something that I want to get into. And we didn't have any competition. We didn't. We negotiated for 2 days to get that VTB, the vendor take back. So like from education, that's how you can start to look for these opportunities. So they're out there. It's just very rare. So I'll just focus on yourself and don't worry too much about what the market is doing. Like you want to make sure that you know what you know what it's doing, but don't get too focused on, oh, this is just going to keep going up, because it will come down as well. And then maybe for some people that is when the time that they'll feel comfortable in purchasing. But I think we'll try to time it. I think it's more like it's time in the market versus trying to time the market in this in real estate is what I believe.
Right on. I guess we could wrap up with maybe, I don't know if you have any future projects like on the line at the moment. You mentioned you got an offer with Sudbury, but I don't know if there's anything in the horizon, maybe something that others can be looking out for if they want to partner with you.
Yeah, we're finishing up this Hamilton flip project in June. So we're going to look for another one this summer, and it might be a build. Actually, we might look for a piece of land or really tear down property, and we're going to tear it down and build a custom home on it. So that's a possibility that we might be doing next. And then we'll be looking for investors during that time as well. So this during the summer is when we'll start looking.
Right on. Well, it's always good chatting with you, Caine, about all of this stuff. I certainly learn a lot every time we talk. So yeah,
Cool.
like hopefully everyone else who's watching this gets a kick out of it.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Henry.
Thank you, man.